Blessings and welcome back, everyone, to our 14th episode in 36 and the second decan of Leo. I'm here joined once again by KD Dayton. Thank you, KD, for being here. And you're at kddayton.com. And then David Fisher. Thanks for being back again, David Fisher, from in the first place. So we are here at the second decan, which is August 2nd or 3rd approximately, to August 11th or 12th approximately, depending on where you are. And I am Elsa. I always forget to introduce myself. So we've got the title from T. Susan Chang, calling this Your Moment in the Sun. And Austin Coppock calls it the Crown of Laurels. It's the Six of Wands, known as the Lord of Victory, and it's quite a prosperous little card, and we're going to get into the nuances here in a moment. But the Crown of Laurels, I just wanted to make a note that laurel, the plant, is known for like being a plant that represents and or magically is associated with fame and success and prosperity. And it says that laurel leaves symbolize, success, fame, prosperity. And in ancient times, laurel leaves were used to signify rank and people in high society. So that's why you'll see Roman and Greek emperors having the laurel wreaths upon their head, is because it was a sign of prosperity, fame, rank, and high society, people of high rank in society. So that is like already a strong synopsis for what we're going to be talking about all day. This is a pretty straightforward decan. It's the sun, because the sun rules all of these Leo decans. And then we've got the second tier, or the second ruler, being Jupiter. So here we have victory, abundance, fame, success. All those are Jupiterian keywords. I'm going to go ahead and read a few notes from Austin Coppock's 36 Faces. So in the second face of Leo, the persona that we talked about before with the mask and the stage is rendered a hospitable place as a host for the spirit. I think what I like most in this decan, as far as what Austin talks about, is what's a Roman custom called triumphus, which is where we get the English word triumph, of course. A triumphus was a lavish parade celebrating the commander of a significant military victory. So they would come home and they would go down like the main street with their carts of spoils and all of the people that came back alive or whatever, and everything that they had gained. And they're about to share that. They're about to divide that. They're about to be opulent with all of those triumphs or victories of war. But what was cool about this is when you would march into the city, you would march down this main street and all through the town, and people would come out and it would be cheering and making merry. But they would end that parade at the temple of Jupiter. Whomever was coming home with the spoils was a celebrated man and treated as a king for the day. So they would just be raised on high. They would be treated as royalty and be able to take on the, not necessarily the responsibilities of being that king, like that sun solar figure, but just almost taking the opulence for a day of what it might be like to be a famed and high regarded person. This face then shows us people who are in the midst of a public victory. So you might be experiencing that, or natives might experience things like that, where you're being upheld by the public. So the spectacle of such victories can be like the sun itself, giving off far more energy than they take in. And so that's a real, solar quality as well as a Jupiterian quality, that which gives from below, it's offered up. I talked about that many times. So it's giving more than it's taking, essentially, and that's what gives the opulence. Victory here, though, comes through authenticity. So if you want to take the best solar qualities, or if you want to take Jupiter, which is opulence, and give it its prime time in the sun or whatever, victory here comes through authenticity, not the perfection of character or moral virtue. It's not the triumph of an ideal man, which is celebrated here, but the flawed victory of a human being whose perfection is not only assured by merely great acts. We'll talk more about this when we talk about like Ibn Ezra or the Picatrix, where we kind of see, a face of a lion in anger. It doesn't dispel this reality of one's own vices. So we'll get a little bit deeper into that as well. And we see also in the Yavana Jataka image, a bold woman standing on a mountain peak. And it adds that she delights in taking from others. So she's attained this like elevated position, but there's privilege there. And so the temptations of selfishness, cruelty, which stain this triumphal nature of the Decan, our character is tested the most when we're put in this place of victory. When you have everything is when your authentic nature shines through. And so, yeah, I guess you get tested, your character gets tested through these types of scenarios. So present here is the strength to accomplish great works and to attain high positions. Yet great works do not guarantee any greatness of character. The ego is fed lavishly in this space, and there are few who can exult in the light without being blinded. This Decan holds within it the magical power of authenticity. Once the persona has become a suitable place to transmit this spirit's impetus, the fierce and potent authenticity is born, and victory here is assured. So I think we're talking about that, again, that inner light, those inner qualities that are shown so much when we add all the opulence and all the money and all the luxury. We see people's core or true nature of their generosity of spirit, or generosity of material wealth. Or do you guys have anything that you want to say about that, or do we just want to hop right into T. and Chang, because I know it's going to flow quite well into talking about the cards?
Yeah, one comment that I just wanted to make, because I enjoy your story of the victor marching to the temple of Jupiter and being able to serve as a kind of figurehead for the day, or like king for the day. It really does call to mind the platitude of to rest on one's laurels, which is to kind of take a break after you've worked really hard. And I think that too speaks to the natural, human flawed character. Like, you're just going to let your ego run rampant for a little bit of time and relax, and don't worry about checking yourself before you have to get back to the work of being the general seeking victory. So
exactly, because it's the middle Decan, there's still more to go, and the sun is always shining and Jupiter is always giving. So at times we just have to take a break and just be us. And I think that's what it is like us in not just our glorious nature and this like golden kingdom, but just like when we are kicking back and just being us. That's when people see who we really are. That's what our true nature is like when we're lamping or whatever, when we're kicking back, it's like, that's when the real us shines through,
Agreed. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to share a few images of different tarot decks, which are showing the 3 different tarot cards associated with this Decan. So the first one, which you've seen before, is the card Strength or Force, which is representative of the sign of Leo. And obviously, as we noted last time in the Leo 1 Decan, there's lots of associations with lions in the Strength or the Force card. So that's very appropriate. But what I want to call to mind now is the nobility and the kingliness that's present in these figures. An interesting note that T. Susan Chang makes in her book 36 Secrets, which we really love as a companion guide to this journey, is that the Marseille tarot used to show a figure with a floppy hat. And I think that's kind of what's depicted here in the middle. It's a traditional form of the tarot, and that was transformed in more modern decks into the infinity symbol to give, I guess, a less kingly sign and association with the exertion of force and will.
I think that you have that, in the Marseille deck, you have the lemniscate, kind of the hat being in kind of the shape of that lemniscate as well.
Totally.
Yeah, and it kind of, I mean, maybe it's them bringing that kingly nature into the spiritual realm or whatever, into the crown chakra, instead of it being like a big headdress, which we see here, right? We see this like big headdress, and a lot of times back in the day, I mean, I'm not sure like how true this is, but I've heard this and I kind of think about it like this, is crowns and headgear was to adorn the crown chakra. It wasn't only to like be known as like this kingly figure, but the crown was to put jewels and gold and everything on that sort of like space between the divine and your transmission of the divine or whatever. Yeah. So the idea of like having a bunch of headgear and crowns and like royal things upon the head had this like not only material but spiritual sort of essence, because like that's how royalty was also thought of back in the day too, is to have like a higher connection with God or whatever it is. So I think like transforming it into like maybe taking it away from the actual garb and into like that more spiritual, quote unquote, ethereal realm, that they're still giving the, you know, when you see like pictures of baby Jesus or Virgin Mary, they give this like halo around the head. It's the same thing as a crown. It's the same thing denoting this kind of importance. And then
it's a Jupiterian thing as well, because Jupiter is what gives signs of kingship. I don't know.
Kingship. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kingliness. And yeah, you see that royals have to show that kind of regalia when they're being crowned, when they're like those types of processions and pageantry. Those are a part of what holds them up, you know, basically in their position of power. Much like the triumph was also a pageantry.
Yes, a pageantry. Pageants are very good. Parades, pageants. And what's interesting that we should just note here is this probably is the most kingly decan of all, because it's the sun, which is kings, and Jupiter, which is the kingmaker, essentially, you know? So it's definitely, whether it's the most kingly, it could be argued, I'd say yes, but it's the most royal just because of those significations. The sun and Jupiter are kings and important high officials and spiritual people and judges and all of those things. So yeah, it's just good to pull that out and note that explicitly, I think.
And especially because when we get to the Six of Wands, you're going to see that figure has the kingly appearance that you sort of referenced in Austin's summary as well. It's just a very kingly figures abound in this decan and these tarot cards. A quote from the book that I really liked that Chang mentions is, "Wherever the sun shines, tropes of kingship tend to accumulate." And so here we are, middle of Leo season, the heart of the lion, sometimes it's called, and the kingship is accumulating. This is also a time of year around August 1st, 2nd, 3rd, it's when Lammas happens, the pagan holiday, to introduce harvest season, which is really interesting. I liked the way that Chang put this in the book, made me think a lot about how at the point of Lammas, we're really looking at the harvest season and the abundance that's awaiting us, but we do not look beyond that into the scarce season of the depths of winter, the winter solstice and everything. We're rather just focused on the abundance, which also to me speaks to a sort of royalty and kingliness, and maybe even another side of this decan and sometimes side of this card is generosity. You know, you want to give abundantly and be magnanimous when you have a lot. And that's definitely the mindset of this card.
Absolutely. I mean, we can get off into some of the more debased possibilities here, but I think what is being called upon is when we're looking at the actual goodness, like when people are actually generous, and when people are generous not with their wealth but with their heart, you know, they're generous from the heart with sort of shackled to how many gold coins you have or whatever it is. It's that generosity and authenticity of spirit that shines through, that we want in leaders and kings, that we would hope for if we were put in that position or whatever. We would hope that we would be loving and caring and generous and opulent and abundant. When that season comes that asks that of us, we would hope that we would, you know, rise to that occasion and be brave and good-hearted and good-natured and things like that.
Gosh, yeah. Generosity. It's always it's always questionable where that's coming from. But in this case, we would think it was coming from the heart. Again, heart of the lion. But the card on the far right here, I wanted to talk a little bit about also in relation to Lammas. This is the Mother Peace deck. And in it is depicted a female figure who could be Artemis, could also be Bridget, which is a Celtic goddess. She has her day Candlemas in February on the other side of the year from here, but she was a like goddess or lady of the fairies, queen of the fairies, maybe one would say. And she's surrounded by animals here, which is also interesting to note because with the lion represented in a lot of these other strength cards, there's that animal element, the animal taming element. So in this card, she's surrounded by what amount to 12, 12 animals, which is a pretty cool thing. It's supposed to mimic the 12 members of a modern coven. So there's the powerful divine female represented in this card as well. But it's also very interesting to see the sun radiating in her hand as another kind of association with how much the strength is, the strength card and the meanings of strength and force and fortitude are central to the sun, what the planet the sun does and its meaning. So that's a beautiful card I like to show here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea again of like the animal kingdom or even humans, just what they need to be happy and healthy is the sun, right? Is that, you know, nature depends on that clockwork of the sun to have abundance for all of its creatures.
Yep. I have up on the screen now a couple of images from the Pythagorean deck. This is on the right, we have force, and on the left, we have Wheel of Fortune. And so I don't know if you have anything you wanted to say about that, but I have another couple cards to talk about the Wheel of Fortune with as well.
I want to talk about this one real quick because I was reading about it, and you see the ass ears in the person on the top of the wheel, at the top of the wheel. So it's basically, I think, an allusion to that strength card of sorts, because you were talking about this animal nature in that person. Is calling back to that, to a thing that we're going to talk about in the Picatrix, which is a base and ignorant man ascends. And it's this particular card is showing that your animal nature and your instincts sometimes bring rigidity to something that is ever flowing, and sometimes you are up there, but because you are up there, your nature has already sown, like when you were going up, the seeds for your downfall, and so the cycle continues, and you're going to be replaced by the one on your left coming up and become the one on your right going down, which also has the tail there. So yeah, it's kind of that what I had for this particular card.
Yeah, and the how it's all resting on the back of the old man, right? It's all resting on what our elders have built for us, and they're bearing the brunt of, like, you know, allowing these young and stupid people to come and take their place because they have no other choice. So we're built on the back of our ancestors, Saturn in this case, representing that old man in tattered cloth. But you see how they're each saying a little, they have a little script with their little sayings there. And that's actually what I was hoping maybe, David, you could read it. It's, you know, part of what was talked about in this fortune card that I just wanted to pluck out is that the goddess Tuke, or Fortuna, is associated with, obviously, the card fortune. And we talk about, like, 2K is like fate and fortune in astrology, and you also see that sort of like incline and decline in the zodiacal wheel of the houses, as far as succedent, and then, you know, angular, and then cadent. But with this 2K, It said that in addition to the goddess Tuke, Greeks and Romans thought that each individual had their own Tuke or Fortuna. It had its own diamonds steering their destiny. The individual Fortuna is the hidden self, which is unconsciously chosen or unconsciously chooses the turnings of fate. And this is in the central core or the hub of the wheel, which is hidden, which I thought was really interesting, with the goddess in the middle sort of hiding that fixed hub of the wheel, and how they just thought of all of us as having our own personal diamond associated with fortune in this case, you know, which was just very astrological in the way that we think of it in Hellenistic astrology. And then those little tags, like what they're saying there's this really cool like poem. It's, I think, written in either Greek or Roman. But David, would you want to read it like in its English translation for us?
Okay, so I'm going to read the poem, and it's the wheel of fortune turns, diminished I descend, another is lifted and raised too high. A king sits at the summit, beware thy ruin. For under the axle we read that Hecuba was queen. It's
really like kind of cool with the rising and falling. They each like say their little stance. It's probably much more like beautiful if I could read like the Latin or the Greek, but they're each kind of saying like one rises, one falls, one comes in to complete that. So I just thought that was a little cool thing to add with the, again, the Pythagorean tarot that we're adding in these episodes now. So exciting.
There's something else that I wanted to say, just the triumph of the Roman, soldier or general that has conquered lands for the empire. It is the highest that someone can get in the Roman time, like even higher than the king, because you're being praised for, because the king is administrating things and all of that, but they're not really war heroes, which was the utmost glory in Roman period. So the triumph would raise someone to the highest capacity, almost to a godlike figure. But as soon as that day was up, meaning as soon as the sun rose in the next day, that person went back to being a normal Roman citizen, and they lost like all power forever until like they regained it somehow, because they were inside the Pomerium. And if they went inside the Pomerium, this region of the Roman capital that was sacred and that was considered, to be, everyone in there who lived in there was equal, was considered to be equal on the eyes, under the eyes of the law. And so they crossed the Pomerium as heroes, and they were allowed to stay in there for that whole day. But if the day broke the next day and they were still in there, which they had to be, they were stripped of all power, all military power, and they lost everything, and they became normal citizens. But it was still worth it for them to do that, because they gained a lot of political power after doing that within the Pomerium, and they could become like senators. They could become even what do you call the king at the time? I forgot. Consul.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and just the idea that we don't always just give from the generosity of our hearts. Like a lot of times when you come home with the spoils of war, you're selective on how you give, where you give, and to whom you give to gain more status and more wealth out of the coin that you got, And
I just like the combination as well, of like the Wheel of Fortune with strength and this image of the triumph, because it's completely combined. Like it really exemplifies the combination of these two cards and the image of this Decan.
I know Jupiter's card, which we're about to talk about. And then we've got the day team, right? We've got the sun, which is this solar benefic. We've got the greater benefic. We've got it on the day team with the sun. They're just a perfect pairing. And we can see that in the cards reflected.
Absolutely. There is another quote that I want to read from the Mother Peace deck, kind of companion book by Vicky Noble. I thought this was a really interesting quotation about the Wheel of Fortune, and the Mother Peace version is in the center of this slide. She says, tarot historians believe the word tarot itself derives from the Latin word rota, as in rotation, and reflects the ancient sense of life as a moving wheel. At the hub is the still axle, but elsewhere the wheel is always cycling through external events. In particular, the Wheel of Fortune is identified with the zodiac. So this really is the astrological card, kind of what you were talking about with Tuke and our individual diamonds, kind of repeated in this card, which is clearly the zodiac. Those are the planets lined up along the middle, and there are 12 segmented portions of the circle of the wheel, which represent the 12 houses that we use in astrology.
And the zodiacal signs here, in this case, the images of the zodiacal signs.
Yes.
I think it's very interesting when we're looking at it as astrologers, this middle card makes so much sense. But I think it's also super beautiful that in most of the tarot cards, you also see tarot written around the wheel. And maybe I've stolen the glory on that one. Maybe you were about to say that. But it's really interesting to see that, that zodiacal framework, but also like no one wants you to miss that it's that same journey, or the hero's journey, or the fool's journey, the tarot journey, and the astrological journey, how they're all like related to that wheel of samsara and that climbing, that cadency, angularity, decline, all of that.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if that's what it's supposed to be, but I love the card on the right with like the beast from the depths being some sort of dinosaur, which is like we ruled over the earth once, but also giving you the impression of like this, the same one in the same thing on the left, where you have a sea underneath the wheel, representing this multitude that is in the unknown, that gives birth to everything, but also that takes everything, that allows everything to recede back to its multitude and unknownness as time goes by and as the wheel spins.
I was actually looking and hoping to find a reference or a myth that might speak to this sort of giant sea creature or sea monster coming up to devour the wheel. And I didn't really come up with anything, although it did call to mind, if anybody's familiar with the myth of the Typhon, and also the idea of the north and south nodes of the moon being represented by a dragon, a perpetually hungry dragon. So anyway.
Who is also born from the churning of the sea, which we see a deep, dark ocean here with Saturn, the Saturnine old man character who's, we know Saturn is of the sea, right? Like drowning or to their death or grasping at this wheel from this unembodied like ocean of Amrita that's just like a never-ending ocean, right? And this is what this ocean of Amrita is what the snakes were churning up when the whole like north and south, in the story of the north and south node being born, essentially, like why the head is severed from the body is in that story. And then you can't really see it here, but in the corner of the left card in the Scapini deck is a little crown falling into the sea.
Right here, yeah.
No, up one.
Yeah, a little. Yeah,
I see it.
Yeah. So you see, like almost that the crowned figure on the top has like lost his crown on the way down or whatever, and you can easily see it in the mother piece, the zodiac. But you can, I'm not sure if you can totally see it, but in the Scapini, in that wheel is the zodiac as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Is the zodiacal images there?
I thought you guys were referring to that one when you started, but it was the mother piece deck.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which has the solar system in it, which is, the ultimate wheel.
Yeah, the ultimate clock a ticking or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. The ultimate cycles. And one of this is exactly kind of the process that we talked about on the previous slide with the Pythagorean cards, where it's the figure that is coming up to be king at the pinnacle of the kingliness, falling away from being a king, and then at the bottom, no longer ruling, no longer king, theoretically dead or drowning. And one of the things that this is really making me think of, though, now that I mentioned it off the cuff, the nodes of the moon are very much associated with circumstance and things dramatically changing quickly with no control. Like you don't have any control over it. It's happening to you. You are not exercising will upon it. And so I think that that is a really important thing to keep in mind with the Wheel of Fortune. There are attitudes that we can adopt to be able to accept the turning of the wheel better. And there are things that we can remember when we are on top of the world to soften the blow when the wheel turns and we head back towards the bottom. But it's a very, very cyclical card. And in fact, Chang in her book calls it amoral. That is very important to remember. It's amoral, outside of morality. There is no good or evil here. It is just the turning of the wheel. And personally, I find that spiritually very provocative and poignant and true.
Yeah, it really is.
When you
it's a Nietzsche.
It is. But when you combine it with the strength card, you get this feeling of I am writing circumstance in the way I will it. I will it, not will. But that's just where I wanted to
build the wheel forward.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's interesting too that we see like the sea serpents of two different colors, like kind of coming up the leg of the blindfolded, again, 2K or Fortuna figure that's holding this wheel. So again, the 2K mother of fate being blindfolded, or whether you say blinded by the sun or blindfolded into the dark. And again, it just, those serpents seem definitely like it could be the nodes, for sure.
Yeah. So again, a couple other beautiful representations of the cards that we wanted to highlight for Jupiter here. But now we get to the Six of Wands, which is in fact another kingly card. So we're seeing yet more representations of rulership, nobility, and leadership. We are seeing literally the depiction of the war hero marching to the Temple of Jupiter here, across 4 different decks, 4 very similar depictions going on. Interestingly, from slightly different angles, which I don't have anything clever to say about that, but I did think it was interesting. And that's really what this card means. Like, it's very easy to summarize the meanings of this card, especially when you get it in a reading. It's victory, it's overcoming, it's fame, recognition, all these things that we were talking about earlier in your discussion of Austin Coppock's book.
I wonder if there's something to be said about the Mother Peace deck's depiction and the fact that the sun is behind the base chakra of this woman. Yes. And it's like appealing to that nature of the card, or of the Decan, of the base instincts that is driving one upwards in this particular scenario. Like, this is not about you being the right person for the job. It's about you having enacted your impulses, your base instincts, and that paying off for the collective in a way that exalts you, right? It's not necessarily that you're like the head. It's necessarily that you embodied something that was beneficial at that particular moment in time.
Well, that's very well, this is supposed to be a figure of Shakti according to the companion guide, but I do want to say that makes perfect sense to me, because you'll also note the wheel behind her. There's sun in the middle and the wheel behind. It's like, regardless of the external turnings of circumstance, she's exerted her power, full fiery leadership over the situation. And you'll note she's holding a bunch of instruments in her hand up here and down here, and they are the 4 elements: fire, earth, water, and air, but also the sun and the moon. So there are 6 wands that she's holding, and it's very magician-y, in some way as well, being able to use those resources and will outside of the turning of the wheel, maybe, or at one specific moment when the wheel is paused in time.
And again, it speaks to me of like authenticity. If you're letting your sun shine from sort of within, like she's within the wheel and the wheel is sort of like behind her as like her own creative force. Because if you think of Shakti, you're thinking of like creative force essentially, or the spark of creation. And like, when I think of the men on the horse, like before we were in like this vehicle of the soul, the chariot, and now we're literally on the horse, it has like this different kind of like base personal power in that same way of like, if you think of this animal being like one with you, you can feel the animal underneath your body, and it's sort of like
evokes Sagittarius.
Yeah, and it's moving for you and everything. And then we're seeing like rest because of that as well. Like you're resting on this animal. It's doing some of the work for you. I just think drawing in the horse-like nature here is really important, just as far as like, you know, a companion of personal power and personal autonomy. Now we don't have two horses going in directions that we have to tame. We have this like one companion that is driving us forward and there to like help us in the war, but in this case bringing us home safely to rest, which I think part of that, I mean, yeah, we see the laurel again and again in all of these figures, we see the horse again and again in all of these figures, but and I know it's all about like the victor of war and the spoils and the opulence, but in this case, can you imagine just how happy you'd be to just come back alive? You know, just like with your own, like you've gone through whatever battle or journey or conquest that you've gone through, and that's tested your personal character, and then you're just like resting in the fact that, you know, people can worship you for it when you get back or whatever, and you can like share with them, but they're never going to know what it took from you to make that journey, you know? Yeah. And I think that's like where the pride, like you see this victorious, almost like pride, like if you're thinking of it from a Jupiterian solar, like spirited level, you could think of it as like, wow, like you made it through whatever journey and you came back alive and you came back all that much more yourself, having been tested.
Yes.
So you reap, you know, in a way you deserve the rewards here.
Yeah.
In a sense, you know, like whatever, you know, I mean, maybe not from like a conquistador, like, you know, vantage point or something like this, but from a spiritual perspective of like going through the fire, making it home alive, sharing with your community, and having that personal authenticity tested. And you know, when you come back that you did it, you made it, you know, you deserve the rest, or you deserve the sort of people being like, hey, good job, pat on the back, like you made it home alive, because we don't always get that pleasure.
It's true. And honestly, everything that you just talked about does epitomize to me the placement astrologically of Jupiter in Leo. And this figure on the horse is Jupiter in Leo. And what we'll see throughout the rest of the Decans, as we have anytime Jupiter is the ruler of the Decan, the Wheel of Fortune is going to appear. And it's interesting to think about what the Wheel of Fortune and Jupiter in conjunction with whatever sign it's in results as. In this case, it definitely results as victory. However, there are places, and Leo is it's a sort of peregrine sign, right, for Jupiter to be in. But it is, there are other signs in which Jupiter is domiciled or fallen, and we will see very different outcomes of the turning of the wheel when we get to that place. In her book, Chang includes a small table where she kind of lays out the dignity of Jupiter in those different decans, not just based on the astrological placement, but also on the ranking in the Tree of Life. And I'm less familiar with that schema, so Elsa, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about that.
Nothing huge, but just that, you know, in the Tree of Life, there's like different sort of like levels. There's like a first level, a second level, and a third level. And where Jupiter falls on those like paths within the Tree of Life will represent like the different kind of like base level or like material level or like spiritual level or something like this, right? And where Jupiter falls within those are also ranking the cards, essentially, like how good they are. So we're going to have like Jupiter in Pisces, which is going to be at home, feminine domicile, very abundant. Okay, fine. We're going to have Jupiter in Capricorn, where it takes its fall, not so great. But in that, they're gaining some of their dignity from, in this scheme, we're looking at it astrologically, but when they're putting it together in the Coleman-Smith deck, they're also looking at other dignities coming from the Tree of Life and where it falls in the, God, what are they called? I don't even know, but those different levels, those different paths in the Tree of Life. So they're sort of combining the dignity to get Jupiter's ultimate standing here.
Yeah. And so Jupiter's rather high up on the tree of life here in Leo. And so it is a very positive, a very positive card in general that we have.
Yeah, day team, baby. This is like all the good things about the day team that you would want. It's active, it's bold, it's courageous, it's authentic, it's, you know, the heart of the lion. It's just beaming. It's all the things that we would aspire towards as leaders, generous leaders. But then we do see the potential decline of when we're not there. And we're going to see that when it comes to the Picatrix.
So what it says in the Picatrix is, there rises in the second phase of Leo a man who wears a crown of white myrtle on his head, and he has a bow in his hand. This is a face of beauty, writing, and the ascension of a man who is ignorant and base. Here it is. And this is a face of war and naked swords. This is its form.
Yeah,
So,
naked swords, meaning swords unsheathed, right? They're not swords like in their sheath, they're out and in the open. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Picatrix shows us a little bit of the rigidity that this part of the zodiac is associated with as well. We're still talking about a fire sign. We're still talking about selection, the selection principle of the solar planets. Jupiter being one of them. Like, you have the day sect being the sun as a leader, and then Jupiter and Saturn as being the benefic and malefic that kind of balance that nature of the sun out. With Saturn, you have a more balanced kind of energy, because you know who you are, you embody it, but you know the weight that it has on you. You know the responsibility. You are very aware of the limitations. And this decan is kind of unimpeded hubris almost. So it's this thing where, yes, you are being given the green light by circumstance, but what will you do with it? Most men will allow their egos to, you know, go overboard and just go nuts with power lust, you know, in this case. And this is what brings their downfall most of the time. When you have a ruler that arises by military achievement, many times they want to keep the violent cycle going, just to keep feeding the thing that put them up high. And that's what wears the people out enough that they want a change of government, that they want a change of, you know, law, legislation, and things like that. These kinds of rigidities that this decan can also bring. So this would be more of a downside. There are mostly positive implications to this decan when you come from this place of achievement and success in one's endeavors. At the same time, you do got to be careful with going overboard. Yeah.
If you think of, like, you know, just even the way people talk about Leos in like modern pop culture or whatever it is, even us, like, well, you know, Leos can be like vain or self-centered or something like this. And when Picatrix is talking about like this base character, they're saying like, well, for the sake of wealth, yeah, and ignorant or something like this. It's like that same thing as vanity. It's, you know, what's your real character? And none of us totally know unless we've been presented with like a lot of riches. Like, ultimately you think you'd be kind and generous, but you probably just buy yourself a bunch of stuff and maybe your family, if you're generous. It might not go like that far out from like your kin in a lot of times. Like, and we don't, you know, yes, we have the spoils of war. Yes, we have the achievement. Let's say it's deserved and we're good people and we've achieved this like crown or whatever. Awesome. But rarely when there's a feast and like lots of drink and gold and food and all of this, will we not overeat or not overdrink or not overspend or whatever, you know? Like, if someone is just like, hey, here's $100,000 or whatever, you're not going to be like, I'm going to safely stow this away and divide it up between those who need it. You're like, shopping spree or whatever, you know? Or like, I've been needing this for so long, I've been needing this. And then you just start buying like yourself all the things that you think that you need, but they're probably beyond needs because our needs change when we get money. And then it's like all of these things. So like, it's very easy for us to imagine ourselves as like kind and generous people, and we mostly are, I think, in our nature, but also it's not above any of us to be like super base with the things that we have, which is just like, let's eat, drink, and be merry. Let's buy ourselves all the things that we wanted. And that can, once you get a little, then that can spiral and spiral and spiral to like needing more and more things very, very quickly, very easily. And like, just, you know, Austin talks about it earlier, but the idea of like giving our charities or whatever only to gain more circumstance or whatever. So it's like, why waste the money on just buying like cars and houses and whatever it is? Why not give my money politically to like keep this king for a day thing going? Maybe I could be king. Maybe I could now be friends with the king and not just king for a day, because if I give generously to his campaigns, then maybe I could get like more fame for longer instead of just like spending my money on me. Maybe I'll spend it politically, or I'll kind of, you know what I mean? So you get like lobbying, essentially, political
And it's
lobbying.
interesting. It's interesting you should mention that, because if you look at history, like you would have these courts, especially if you had like a son, that a prince that hated their parent that was on the throne, you would be like, you'd have one court, and then when fate struck and the person became the king or queen instead of their parent, the court had to be changed. The counselors would be changed, and the people who had invested so much time, money, effort to be the king's advisors would just lose that power if they didn't invest in like marrying their children with the new monarch or with their offspring or whatever. So they had to do all these games, but many times in history you saw people that had a lot of power just going down because the power dynamics shifted because of fate, because one king died and the next rose, and they were like, nope, off with you, you know, or with your head altogether.
Yes, that's exactly it, is using our wealth to try to secure more wealth. And that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but again, that can easily go base quickly, you know, with trying to use your spoils to get further.
You become ignorant when you forget this changeability, this mutability of circumstance. And that's what I feel the first decan makes you so aware of, that you will want to be one thing and one thing only, and I will not diverge from it. And it's because of that reason. But this decan is like unlimited power if you only know how to use it, you know. If not, you'll just fall really from a high place.
Yeah, and I just wanted to,
really
you know,
place.
you make a good point, and I hope I'm not just like saying what you just said, but in a way you think about, you know, the fixity of Leo, very fixed. The first decan, very fixed. We've got like Saturn there helping fix it quite strongly, but we're still fixed in this sign. And Jupiter is a, you know, movable. That's why we got that wheel of fortune, or like that thing turning, because Mercury and Jupiter are like constantly essentially changing. They're not necessarily as comfortable with the fixity.
And of the external planets, so the solar system has this belt of asteroids that divides the terrestrial planets from the gas giants. Jupiter is the first one of the gas giants and the first one of these outer planets that take up like a whole year to leave a sign, whereas from Mars below, you get like maximum 6 months when Mars is retrograde, and normally 6 weeks when Mars is direct, as the slowest of the faster moving terrestrial planets. And so the same way you see that, you see Jupiter, you see the Wheel of Fortune being the 10th arcane in the Fool's Journey. And when you get to the 10th, the Fool has been through a whole set of arcana that will allow him to have a perspective in life now that is more enlightened. And like he's going to a next phase. He's been through self-awareness. He's like, oh, I am a being. Oh, I can make choices of my own. Oh, I can move by myself. Oh, I can use the elements around me. So it's like this first phase of recognizing oneself is completed. And now you're able to see circumstance around you completely, and how things are always turning, and it's not only dependent on you. And now in the next phase, you're going to have to deal with this reality, that your dreams, the things that you did in the first set of cards, is not like permanent. All the ideas that you had, they are not forever, and you still have to learn to deal with that, even though you had learned in the first go around a lot. You feel like you've done all the lessons now. They're deepened from now on.
And we're going to talk about Mars in the next Decan, but not to be confused in this way. Like, I think we've done a pretty good job, but we're talking about someone coming back from war with the spoils of war. And yes, there are, you know, military rank that go out that already have power and wealth or prestige or whatever, if they're like leading this army. But if you think about when people, even now, but back in the day, like in my mind, it's like an older, like I'm making it up as an older reference, but I suppose it would be a contemporary thought as well, that a lot of times when you join the military, you're doing it to get a higher rank, get more wealth. Like you would go out and pillage or whatever it is in order to gain power, in order to gain more money. So you have to think that this guy has gone out maybe poor or lesser in rank, and then when he comes home, he'll see if he's getting an upgrade in rank, like according to how he did. And yes, he might get that king for the day, but that might be it. Or he's come home with enough to sort of like set his family to a different status or something like this, you know. But you have to think of the people that go out in military combat are often of lowly rank and desperate to do so. Like nowadays, people need their college paid for, or they need this or they need that. It's like they're going out because they needed to for some reason, and then coming home to a new rank. So again, the changeability of rank, or the striving for higher rank or higher status in that military paradigm, I guess. So I think that concludes for today what we have for you for Leo 2. So I hope you all are still enjoying the heart of the summer. And thank you again so much, KD, Dayton, and David Fisher, for being here again today and being such authentic and shining examples of Sun and Leo.
I have Leo 2 moon. We didn't even mention that, but I have a Leo 2 moon.
Hey,
there you go.
Nice.
So I'm incarnate here just so you guys can see how this Decan embodies itself in people.
Yeah. Very kingly.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm glad
Crown
we've got
her.
that. Yeah, so we've got a shining example here for y'all today. And David Fisher, people can find you with through In the First Place here on YouTube, In the First Place Astrology, and your handles, all of your stuff.
Yeah, my handle's in the First Place Astrology is my handle on Instagram, and you can find me through that on Facebook as well. That's my page and personal profile. And you have First Place Astro on Twitter, if you guys want to follow that as well. I've been a little slow to start, you know, getting a rhythm of posting, especially on my channel and on Twitter, but my life has been a little chaotic through the past month, but I will come back to producing more content for you guys. So do check that out.
It's always ebb and flow, you know. We've got the
It's
wheel
the
of
cycle.
fortune. It's always turning. And
Yes.
KD, you're at kddayton.com,
Yes.
and you're available for tarot readings, astrological readings.
All of it.
Awesome. Cool. Same with myself. You guys can find us again on the About section of this page or in the links below.
As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, like this video, drop a comment. It always helps the algorithm like us better. So if you want to support us but can't help us through Patreon, and do check the Patreon link out, you can do that. Yeah,
please do. You know, when you guys comment below, it's like I'm the person on the horse, like coming through the town to the Temple of Jupiter. Like I feel very honored when you all comment, and it makes me feel like, you know, we put actually so much into this, like studying these, talking about these, recording these, and it just feels good to know that people are engaging on any level, even if we don't hit our 1,000 subscribers, if we don't, whatever, like the comments really do make me happy, like a king for a day or whatever. So thank you all for commenting and engaging below, and thanks for being here, everyone. And happy summer, happy Leo 2. See you next time for Leo 3.
All right. So at the end of T. Susan Chang's book, she includes a little verse or a poem. And this Decan for Leo 2, it's called Sunflowers Over the Corn by Kenneth W. Porter. Here were the fierce devouring suns, arrows of burning gold beat down, unfenced by palisades of rain, through all the summer skeletons of corn, dust gray and brittle brown, lie on the ruinous battle plain, which hordes like those of Timar hold, equipped with massive flame-rayed shields, beaten from freshly plundered gold, vast armies of the sun's own flowers, flooding the wide horizon fields about the empty silo towers.
Matao kako bersama you kena soba da soba kena matai banako di mawa kena soba and soba matai banake ujuna ba ikana kamaya ta onga ija Koyo Marcena Matai Bekana Sabaso Indakina Tabaine Toyukas Imbayatoma Wadabaike Tiuna Makano Yoga Sono me yabagona Gamoyana goyimi On my way go by Tiuna Makano Yoga Sono me yabago